Hello yarn tubers, welcome back to Dana's Wanderlust Crochet. This is it. This is the introduction video that's going to go up before we start the crochet along. Okay, so what you need is I'm just going to assume in these videos that you are going to use a 4-weight, that you're going to follow this pattern. Most of you are, smart enough in your crochet knowledge and experience that if you want to do something different with your own creativity, it's your blanket. Okay, but I'm going to assume you want to make this wonderful Hag's Christmas Wheel Afghan. So here's how it's going to work. First of all, you're going to need 7 different colors. One of them will be your base color, which will go in between all the other colors. And then you're going to need 6 more. I'm just assuming you're going to use a 4-weight. And I highly recommend you use an H hook because we want that hag stitch definition to come out. So I have chosen my Christmas colors. 3 of them are variegated. And 3 of them are solid, but like that white number 5 up there is, it's got some bling in it. So I just laid them out on the table like this, and I took a Sharpie and I wrote, 1 through 6 on the labels. So they're numbered. Don't overthink it. Okay, and then we start with, I'm going to give you a hint, a starting point before we spin the wheel next week. Just trust me in this process. You're really going to enjoy it. The height of each of these colors that come along in the Afghan are going to be different each week. But here's what you need. You need a row of half double crochets, 36-ish inches. Mine's a little bit longer than 36 inches. And I'm probably going to go a little taller in the Afghan than 48. But let's just talk about a 36 by 48 inch Afghan, okay? It will have a border. And it will be done in time for Christmas if you follow right along. And, you can come up to this like any crochet along and follow everything in the playlist years later and do the same thing. But here's how, if you want to get started now, before I spin the wheel in next week's video, you need an even number of half double crochets 36 inches long. You can do that by chaining an odd number that measures 36, or you can do a chainless half double crochet row and make sure it's an even number of stitches and make sure it measures 36 inches. So if you do the chain, if you chain an odd number, and you do your chain long enough to measure out to 36 inches, then you're going to turn your work. You're going to do a half double crochet in the second chain from the hook and all the way back. You not only need to know that they're an even number, you should know your number of stitches so that you know you're doing the right thing. You've got the right, if you ever have to count your row stitches because something's looking wonky, you should know what that number is. Mine is 118. And I did my chainless foundation of half double crochet, and then I started the hag stitch. Just a couple things that I noticed. So I did my regular, my row of half double crochet, and then I came back across to do the hag stitch, which is the beginning and end of every row is a regular half double crochet, right? Gives us a nice edge. Then you start out after that alternating between the back loop, and then on the next stitch over, you're going to look at the back loop, you'll look at where the front loop is, and then just below it is kind of a diagonal bar, and that's called the third loop. And you're going to half double crochet into the third loop. Now at that point, what helps me get into the correct stitch, because you never want to skip a stitch, which I did on my first hag stitch row and had to frog it out. What I do to help me make sure I am in the correct stitch is, okay, so you're going to start out in the back loop. Then I'm going to go to the next stitch and I'm going to do it in the third loop. And then what I do is I look at the next third loop in the next stitch over, and I count how many loops. So I see the third loop, and then I see the front loop, and then there's the back loop. And you really have to tilt this towards you in order to see the top of those stitches, because I guarantee you, once you get going, when you look at the third loop and then you look at the front loop, they can look like the top of a stitch. So your first row of hag stitches, you need to slow down a little bit. You need to make sure that when you get to the very end, your second to last stitch is in the third loop, and your very last stitch is a normal half double crochet. I came to the end and it wasn't correct. Okay. So I frogged that first one, and I took a little time, and I found out I had actually skipped over a whole stitch. Sometimes when you do your third loop and you just immediately, tip your work up to look for the top of the next stitch, some people have actually gone into the same stitch that they just did the third loop. Does that make sense? Instead of advancing to the next one. So I'm just warning you, be very careful, be very meticulous to make that first row correct. And then, the second row gets a little easier. And then the third row, you just start training your eye as to how you recognize where that next stitch is placed, right? Okay, so I did that. And just so you know, if you want to get started before we spin the wheel next week, you need to do your first row of regular half double crochets, and then you need to do rows of hag stitch rows until you reach 2 inches tall. So your first stripe in your base color is going to be 2 inches tall. So go ahead and get started, and then next week's video, you are going to see me spinning the Christmas wheel. Now, the Christmas wheel, let me bring this up. I downloaded an app that is a spinning wheel. Spin the Wheel app. And I will be playing with the colors on this, but the Hag's Christmas Wheel Afghan, I actually decided instead of just doing 6 wedges, I'm doing 12. So when I spin that, it's going to be 1 through 6, 1 through 6 again on the wheel. So it made the wheel bigger and prettier and more fun to watch, right? So stay tuned, because the next video in this crochet along is going to be me spinning the wheel for what color number. Let's say that I spun the wheel and it landed on number 5, then I would be doing this, I'd be doing rows of hag stitches with this until I reach the height that I will tell you it needs to be. But I'm not going to tell you that height until after I spin the wheel next week. So each row height is going to be random. And let me tell you where I got this. I'm back. I'm sorry I didn't have my prop ready. So this is my luck of the draw. Does this whole thing sound very similar to the luck of the draw? Well, that's because it is. Now, I decided to do this in the thermal stitch, and I love how it's turning out. But I got an idea to do a crochet along for Christmas colors. And because with this one, see, I'm doing different. See how the thickness of each of these colors is different each time? And I love the randomness of that. And so I have come up with this idea, and I ran it by Nancy from Nan's Next Knots. I totally got her blessing. Thank you, Nancy. A lot of people were saying, you don't need to do that. Well, I don't need to, but I want to. I don't want Nancy to feel disrespected, because this is totally like, I'm inspired by her. Okay, yeah, I'm inspired by her. I'm making it a little different with those row heights. I also contacted Ryan, the Yarn Hag Ryan, our beautiful Ryan, and talked to her about using the hag stitch, and she's like, do it. And she said she's going to join along. So that's where we got the Hag's Christmas Wheel Afghan that will be ready in time for Christmas. So any questions, email me, message me, put them in the comments, come into Zoom, and we will work it out. Okay? Okay. get your base color and, you know, your edge, your first of your Afghan ready. And next week I will be spinning that wheel. Okay, I love you guys. Bye.